In one of the three episodes we dropped last week, again, last week relative to this week, I know you watch and listen to these podcasts at your own schedule, and sometimes you listen to several of them at one time. But if you go back to one of the previous episodes, we talked about how many guests does it take for your church to grow? How many guests do you have to have in a week for your church to grow? And we said 3 to 6 per 100 in attendance. 3 to 6. If a family of 5 comes, that counts as 5 people. And so I went over a lot of the details about that. Now, what I'm going to do is this is not necessarily part 2 to something I did last week, but this is to give you some insights on how to increase the flow of guests where they may be able to come and be evangelized or hear biblical preaching. And so we're going to talk about creating a culture of inviting in your church. We're going to look at 4 of the key issues that are really important, that encourages, even entices your church members to start inviting people. We'll talk about that. Thank you, Belay. Belay is our sponsor. Belay is the organization that is so gracious to provide you the resources so that you can watch this free. They pay all the bills. They do all the work. They provide you in your organization the type of person that is a great fit. They do the matching, the paying, all of the good stuff. Belay Solutions, incredible organization. We're proud that they're our sponsor and our partner, and we've been proud of that for many, many years. Once again, text THOM at 55123 to get the free download. And the free download is called The Power of Productivity. That's text Thom, THOM, at 55123. Let's talk about this issue. How do we create a culture of inviting in our church? We all agree that we would love for our church members to be inviting more, because usually when they invite someone, if that person comes, that person, if it's not a Christian, will hear the gospel. That person, if they're not a Christian, or if they are, say, a baby believer, they will then hear the word preached, and they'll continue to grow in Christ. There's just so many reasons we won't guess. I mean, that's what we're about. We're about reaching people with the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Great Commission. And if it's the same saints there every Sunday, that means we're not looking beyond the walls of our church. So how do we create a culture of inviting? Well, the first thing is very simple. The church has to have an outward focus. I've used those 2 words so many times that I just presume people know what it means. And most people do not know what it means. First of all, I want to say an inward focus in some areas is good. If you're focusing on taking care of your members, if you're focusing upon helping the members to grow in their knowledge of Christ and in the Bible, that's good. That's focusing inward on those who are there. If you're doing ministry to the shut-ins, that's good. If you're looking after the senior adults, we all appreciate it. That's good. But a church without an outward focus is, quite frankly, not a church at all. The early church was born out of an outward focus. After Peter preached his sermon at Pentecost and thousands became followers of Christ, the church was born. And they from that moment of reaching people with the gospel, they continued to. And when they weren't reaching people with the gospel, they weren't a healthy church. So one of the things we got to do is create a culture that is outward focus. I've mentioned this on many occasions, but I'll mention it one more time. If you haven't tried this in your church, I'm just going to challenge you to do this 30-day plan. It's a 30-day jumpstart called the Hope Initiative. And you can go back and listen to some of our previous podcasts where we've talked about this. But I got to tell you, this particular 30-day initiative God is using in many churches to create a culture that is outwardly focused. And once you get that culture created, I want to tell you that inviting becomes just a bit easier. In fact, I would say it becomes a bit more natural, if not supernatural. So one of the things that we will say here is create a culture of outward focus. That's just one way that you can do it. Secondly, let your people know that an invitation needs to be accompanied with specificity. That's a mouthful. An invitation needs to be accompanied with specificity. Let me explain. If you say, hey, I go to Spring Hill Church, I wish you'd come visit us. That's the least effective. Now, it's more effective than no invitation at all, but that's the least effective. Now, let's get more specific. I go to Spring Hill Church, and I want to invite you, and our services are at 9:30 and 10:45. More specifics. Try this one. I go to Spring Hill Church. Our services at 9:30 and 10:45. I tell you what, if you come to the 10:45 service, I will meet you outside the church and we'll go into the church building together. Ooh, now you have taken it to a new level, because one of the things that keep people from going to a church is not 85% of people are positive toward an invitation to church. Just hear me on that. So most of them are going to be receptive. But what the barrier that's holding them back, they don't want to go to a strange place. You've removed one of those barriers for the most part because you're walking with them into the church. You want to get more specific? So more specific. I go to Spring Hill Church. I want to invite you to our, I'm going to use 10:30 service. Hey, I'll meet you out front. We'll walk in the church together, and then I'd like to take you and your family out for a meal. I want to tell you, if it has all those components, the invitation, the time of the service, walking into the building with them, an invitation to a meal after service, the chance of someone coming has grown by about 9-fold. It's amazing, going from that general invitation to something that is very specific and very committed as well. So what else do we want to say about this? We want to say that there has to be an emphasis on prayer. And that prayer ministry in the church needs to be emphasizing those who are not yet there. And so what that means is your prayer ministry, whether it's through the Hope Initiative or some type of focused initiative, your prayer ministry is indeed focusing upon the lost and those who are not there. Your prayer ministry can even say, God, open up the doors for us to bring people into our church that are not here currently. The lost who need to know Christ and be saved, the Christians who need to grow in Christ who may not be active in the corporate body. So that's another thing, the prayer emphasis of the church. Finally, invitations, and I'm speaking of inviting people to church, need to be emphasized redundantly in the church. And there are ways that you can do it other than just lecturing people and lecturing church members. That, for example, the pastor can be talking about something and he can give an illustration of someone in the church who invited someone else to church. And this is what happened. Or when someone becomes a follower of Christ and they do a video testimony like many churches do that is powerful. And they say, the reason I became a follower of Christ is because I was invited to church first by Jim and Dolores. And Jim and Dolores invited us to church. We heard the gospel and we became followers of Christ. The more that you can emphasize in innovative, creative ways that invitations are what church members are supposed to do, the more they will be doing it. It just becomes normative. Quite frankly, most church members don't have it in the back of their mind that they need to be inviting someone to church. They need a regular reminder. So these are four ways to just make your church the type of church that has a culture of invitation. And in doing so, you won't only have a culture of invitation, but you'll also have an evangelistic church, because people will come, God's Spirit will work in their lives through the preached word and through the sharing of the gospel, and your church will be turned upside down in a good way as Christ is proclaimed and new people become followers of him. Once again, thank you, Belay. Don't forget about them, belaysolutions.com. Don't forget about their download, The Power of Productivity. Make certain that you go to Thom, Thom, at 55123 and get that download. We're going to continue talking about some of these issues that I think are not only fun, but they have gospel implications to them. Come back for your next 10-minute nugget. Come back for your next 10-minute nugget, and you, I think, and I will have fun together. We'll see you then.